Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Now today I'm going to be making a Victoria sandwich sponge cake. I've had a request from somebody to make sponge cake. They've been doing it and it hasn't worked very well. So what I'm going to do over the next few weeks is make 3 different types of sponge cake. Today is going to be the Victoria sandwich, and this is using an all-in-one method, which is easier, and I'll explain that a bit later. And then later on I'm going to do a hot milk sponge cake, and after that I'll do a sort of chiffon type sponge cake, a very light sponge cake. But just for today, this one is going to be the Victoria sponge, and it's called all-in-one because all the ingredients go into the bowl at the same time and get mixed together. The other way of doing it is to add the butter and the sugar and cream them, and add the eggs separately and the flour separately and mix it together. But this works just as well, but it has some additional raising agent in it because you're not beating the eggs in quite the same way. So this has additional raising agent. So for the ingredients, I have 225 grams of softened butter. That's 2 sticks of butter in the USA. I have 4 large eggs, that would be extra large in the USA. I have 225 grams of self-raising flour, that's 1 3/4 cups, and I have 225 grams of castor sugar, which is 1 1/4 cups. And I had some vanilla castor sugar, or castor sugar with vanilla bean in it, so I'm using that for mine, just as a bit of extra flavour, but it doesn't matter, you don't need to do that. And I also have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, that's the additional raising agent that I mentioned, and I'm going to just put that in the flour and give it a bit of a stir around before we start. I should also say I have 2 8-inch sandwich tins which I've greased and lined with parchment paper. Now these actually have a slightly sloping edge. I would prefer1straight edge, but they have a slightly sloping edge, but they'll be fine. And I also have my oven preheating to 180 Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, gas mark 4 I think that is. And so what we do is we put the butter, the sugar, the eggs and the flour and the baking powder all into our bowl. Now the important thing is that you do not over mix this, so we're simply going to mix it until it all comes together to a dropping consistency. And that's about right. If you think it's a little bit too firm, you can add maybe a tablespoon of milk and see if that helps it, but I think mine's fine like that. So the next thing to do is to put it into our cake tins and divide it as evenly as possible. I'm actually going to weigh it just to get it accurate. So I have there 700, so I need 350 grams in each tin. Okay, so I've put those in, and then we just level them off. And so with those levelled off nicely. I'm going to put them in the oven and I'm going to bake them for 25 minutes. And that's until they're coming away from the sides of the tin and they're springy to the touch. Then I'm going to take them out and leave them in the tins to cool for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to turn them out onto a wire rack to cool completely. And when they've cooled completely, we'll put some jam and some buttercream. Now you could use just jam for a Victoria sandwich, or you can use jam with whipped cream or jam with buttercream, and I'm going to use buttercream, so we'll do that when I come back. Well, our sponges have baked and I've taken them out of the tins and allowed them to cool down. Now I'll put one upside down on the turntable, and I'll put it upside down so that it matches the bottom. As I said, there was a slight slant on them, so it matches the bottom of the other one. So I'm going to set those aside and I'm going to make the buttercream. Now you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it just for extra flavour to go with the jam. And as I said, you could use, if you wanted to, you could use whipping cream and whip that together with some icing sugar. But I have 140 grams of icing sugar and 100 grams of softened butter. And I'm also going to add, just for a bit of extra flavour in the buttercream, a little bit of vanilla bean paste. You could use vanilla extract, or you could scrape a vanilla bean if you wanted to. But I only have a little bit here. If it deigns to come out. And then I'm going to whisk the butter with the icing sugar on slow to start with, otherwise the icing sugar will go everywhere. Okay, so the buttercream is whipped together. So I'll just set that aside for a moment, and I'm going to take some jam. Now I'm using strawberry jam, you could use raspberry jam, and I'm actually using my favourite one, which is Little Scarlet, which has whole strawberries in it, very tiny strawberries, and I'm going to put a reasonable amount on there, and just that's probably about 3 to 4 tablespoons, and I'm going to spread it around almost to the edge. And you can see the chunks of strawberry in this, but you don't have to use it. You can use raspberry jam, anything you want really. No reason why you shouldn't use apricot or blueberry if that's what you prefer. So we'll just set that aside for a moment while we put the buttercream on the underside of the other sponge. And just spread that all over. And And again, I'm going to push this almost to the edge because I'm simply going to place it on top of the other layer. I'm not trying to spread it on the layer. So really that's good enough for that. So then the final thing to do is to put that on top of our our strawberry layer. Like that. And that's our cake basically. So that's what the cake looks like. Now I'm not going to cut this one, and I should say you could sprinkle some castor sugar or some icing sugar on the top, but I'm not going to cut this one because I want to deliver it to somebody. But basically it's a nice easy sponge cake to make. I think you'll agree. And so I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below, and please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye which will take you to this recipe, and I should say this recipe is Mary Berry's recipe for the sponge cake. And I've seen lots of people, I've seen the same recipe repeated all over the place. I mean, it's all using Mary Berry's basic recipe. The link will take you to that recipe, and I'll also put a link below the video for that, and I will be back with you with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.